May I have some paper? Please. Please, may I have some paper? 'Cause these words of mine go walk away. They go walk away all by themselves and get lost in the crowd. May I have some paper, please? Please, may I have some paper? To catch these words and wrap them up where they can't walk away, slip off the edge, and drown. I was turning into a little thief, always stealing bits and pieces of paper to write on. Sometimes it was the paper bags that Poppy brought home his bottles of rum in. Sometimes napkins or gray paper that the shopkeepers used to wrap up goods. But I wanted more than anything, a notepad of my very own. One in which I could write poems by Ana Rosa Hernandez on the first page and then fill it up with words, long words, short words, words that smelled and tasted and felt like something new. But my only notebook was for school. Mommy told me that the new notebook cost 40 pesos, a lot of money, 2 whole dinners for our family. How many bottles of rum can Poppy buy with 40 pesos, I wondered. My brother, Guario, had a notepad. It was filled with pages of empty spaces, waiting for words. I asked him once, Guario, can I have your notepad to write my poems in? He shook his head. It's for work, Cara. I'm sorry. But you can tell me your own poems anytime you want. I looked up at my big brother and smiled. Guario worked as a waiter at a restaurant near the beach. Everyone knew that Guario had one of the best jobs in town because he was very handsome. The tourists liked to have him smile and chat with them while they ordered their food. Girls from cold, faraway countries were always falling in love with my brother. They touched his dark curly hair and listened to him call them mi amor. One Friday night, Guario went rushing out of the house to meet his best friend, Angel. They were going to a club to dance bachatas, and Guario left his notepad sitting on the table. I was alone in the house. Mommy had gone out to visit a neighbor. Papi was down at the colmado playing dominoes. Robert and Angela were nowhere around. Suddenly, a breeze swirled through the house and flipped open the cover of Guario's notepad. The empty pages, filled with wind, blew up one after another, showing me all the lovely blank spaces waiting for words. I could write on a few pages and tear them out, I thought. Guario would never notice. I picked up a pencil and looked around. No one was coming. So I wrote, first one page, then another, and another. I stopped when I had filled 5 pages with words about Mount Isabel de Torres and about Sousa Beach, which I love. I wrote about the Niños and about climbing my favorite grigri tree. I wrote a poem about Angela, my beautiful, silly older sister who knew nothing but how to smile at men passing by our porch. I wrote about my brother Roberto, who worked hard in the sun renting beach chairs to tourists. Suddenly the lights went out. It was another power blackout, a good thing too, because I might not have stopped writing. I tore out the pages carefully and slipped them into my pocket. I went and I sat on the porch and watched as the sky filled up its blue spaces with pinks and oranges and a deep, deep purple. Utter darkness swelled over everything. With the darkness was complete silence, as well as since the neighbors' radios could not blare out their loud merengues. I felt the pages in my pocket, just a couple more, I thought. No one would know at all. I tiptoed back inside, lit a candle. I sat at the table and wrote under the candlelights. I wrote one page after another until there were no empty pages in Guario's notebook. Then I heard a noise. Ana Rosa, are you there? It was Mommy. I jumped and stuffed the notepad into my pocket. See, Mommy, right here. What are you doing, cariño? She asked. Nada, Mommy, nada, I said loudly to chase away the shakings in my body. Mommy came over and put her hand under my chin. She tilted my head toward the candle's light and looked into my eyes. You sure? She asked. I nodded and swallowed. I put my hand over the notepad in my pocket and slipped out of the room. I went into the bedroom that I shared with Angela. I sat on the bed with my hands in my pocket, holding my secret close. Finally, I reached under the thin mattress and stuffed the notepad as close to my side of the bed as I could. The next day, everybody in the house was looking for that notepad. Guario was shouting that he would be fired. That made Poppy very frightened, although Poppy always swore that if he got up off this porch chair in the middle of the day, he'd get a heat stroke. He, too, was helping to look for the book. It was like a madhouse. Papi and Guerrero and Roberto and Angela and my little cousins were throwing everything out in the front door in their frantic search. Chairs, a radio empty, rum bottles, old newspapers, clothes, shoes, our 2 dogs, some stray hens pecking at this and that, all went sailing into the dusty yard. Of course I knew exactly where it was, under the mattress, but I was too scared to say so. I pretended to help look around the house. Then I went into the kitchen where Mommy was rolling out dough for empanadas. Mommy, I said nervously, everyone's looking for Guario's notepad. Mommy nodded her head but didn't look up. I only had to stand there for a minute before she said, "It will turn up when it's ready." That's when I knew that she knew. I waited for her to shout at me, but Mommy just kept on sprinkling flour and rolling the dough. I just didn't understand Mommy at all. I went into the bedroom and slipped my hand far under the mattress. The notepad was there. I sat on the floor chewing on my finger. Guadio had already asked me twice if I had seen his notepad, and I had said no. I couldn't stop how fast the no came out of my mouth. I wanted to tell him the truth, but my mouth just wouldn't say anything else. "What are you doing just sitting there?" asked Angela, coming into the bedroom. She tossed pillows on the floor and started to pull the sheets off the bed. "I'd looked there already," I said quickly, before she decided to turn the mattress upside down. My heart was beating faster and faster as Guadio's shouting filled up all corners of the house. Papi was cursing and Roberto and Angela were racing around with scared looks on their faces. There was a horrible fear in the air, fear of what would happen if Guadio lost his job. There was no way in the world I could hand over that notepad, now with every page of it full with my careless words. Then we heard Mommy's voice. "Lunch is ready. Come inside and eat, and stop fussing about that notepad." The stern sound covered me like night's sweet darkness. Mommy knew, and she wasn't telling. Now, no matter what is wrong in our family, we always listen to Mommy. So when Mommy called us to all to eat, we stopped our wild hunting and sat down at the table. Papi said the prayer, and Mommy served us plates full of red beans and rice and crispy brown empanadas stuffed with chicken and spices. There were tall glasses of lime juice and precious ice cubes. It was one of the best lunches ever, and it could have been served for a holiday. It was as if Mommy had cooked this special meal on purpose to distract the family, and it worked. Afterward, everyone sat back full and relaxed, as if empanadas could make the world look brighter and red beans and rice made worries disappear. We talked about where the notepad could be and what could have happened to it. Papi wasn't cursing anymore and Guadio wasn't shouting. Finally, Papi reached into his pocket and took out some pesos. He put them on the table. Then Mommy dug her hand deep into a pocket of her dress and put some pesos on the table too. Roberto jumped up and went into the kitchen and came back with some pesos that he put next to Papi and Mommy's pesos. Guadio looked surprised, and I noticed that his eyes were turning bright red as if he were trying not to cry. But that could not be possible. I had never seen Guadio cry in my life. Guadio was 19 years old, and he was my big, strong brother who took care of everything. Mommy called him Jefe when Papi was not around. Jefe means boss, and that is what Guadio was. He worked 2 jobs and brought all our food and fixed everything that went wrong. He was always serious. "Here," said Papi, pushing the pesos over to Guadio. "Take this and buy a new notepad for work." Guadio nodded and stood up. He walked around the table and kissed Mommy on her cheek. Then he walked out of the house to go to work. I watched Guadio's wide back move steadily away from us. When I turned around, Mommy raised her eyebrow at me as if to say, "What are you waiting for?" I jumped up and ran after Guadio. He was at the corner waiting for one of the noisy motorcycle taxis to take him to work. "Guadio," I called. He turned around. I dashed up to him and threw my arms around his waist. His hand smoothed down the flyaway hairs in my ponytail. "I took your notepad," I whispered into his shirt. "I'm sorry." Guadio kept stroking my hair. After a while, he said, "I know what it feels like." What feels like, I asked, to want something so bad. "What have you wanted so bad?" I asked, looking up at him. "A future," he answered, and then I saw the tears in his eyes for real. This was not the first time I had heard Guadio talk about wanting a future. I just never paid it any attention. But to be right there at the moment, hearing and seeing him, the whole world tilted for the first time away from me to someone else, my big brother. Guadio and I stood at the corner with our arms around each other as all the motorcycle taxis drove by blowing their horns. It was the first time I knew that words could not tell everything.